I've seen.
Oh my God, what are you, a human like,
Martin wants to get
who's that thing called?
Martin wants to get
Human wind chime. You're a human
Well,
wind
we'll be
chime.
getting started in just a minute, so thank you all for your attention.
Another minute.
And Bonnie, thank you so much for having us here at your lovely house.
You're welcome.
It's
My
just
pleasure.
a beautiful place you have here in Princeton. And we're very happy today to have the author Martin Lee come talk to us about his project CBD and his book, Smoke Signals, The Social History of Marijuana, Medical, Recreational, and Scientific. So, without further ado.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm 10 days into a speaking tour. It lasts for one more week. I started in Massachusetts, went to Vermont, was in upstate New York in the North Country, which they describe as America's Siberia. The main cash crop there is prisoners, almost 30 different prisons in that part of the country. And it's been very interesting because each stop is a different audience, different venue. Yesterday, speaking in the inner city of Albany, all black audience, probably at least half the audience had been in jail for drug crimes. Then at a state university and a dispensary in Vermont, and so for me it's a lot learning. What's striking is that everybody's interested in CBD wherever you go. And one of the points I always make in a talk is that as we're in the midst of this cultural shift around cannabis, and we are, although the political realities lag behind the cultural changes, the political changes, particularly in this state, are woefully behind. What does it all pretend? And it's my feeling that should this momentum for marijuana continue in terms of legalization, whether it's across the board for adult use, like in Washington, Colorado, or in medical marijuana as it is already now in 20 states, that this momentum will increase. And that as a result of this, I don't think we're going to see, and if there would theoretically come a time, hopefully soon, where federal prohibition is lifted, I don't think this will result in a sort of a deluge of marijuana smokers, recreational smokers. It's my feeling that if you want to smoke marijuana in America, you're probably already doing it. I mean, there might be a few people that are waiting at the edge of the seat, you know. Do you know anybody who's waiting for federal government to legalize before they try it? You know?
I know a few.
Okay, all right, I mean, there are a few, and I don't mean to make light of it, but there are, but for the most part, people who want to be smoking marijuana in America are already doing it. I think the change will come, the real expansion of the medical marijuana scene will be in terms of medical use, in particular in terms of what we call the CBD-rich marijuana. CBD-rich strains. By that I mean strains or products that have at least an equal amount of CBD, cannabidiol, the non-psychoactive component, and THC, or maybe more CBD than THC. That's how we refer to what we mean by CBD-rich. So I think in that context, we're going to see a lot more people come into the scene who aren't part or don't relate to the marijuana subculture, who don't relate to the idea of going into a dispensary with the Bob Marley poster on the wall. I have nothing against that. I love Bob Marley. But that just, well, maybe they tried it in college and they didn't have a good experience. A lot of people, they smoke marijuana and they don't like the experience that it's that they get from it. You know, this swimmy-headed feeling that probably most of us in this setting like, but a lot of people find it makes them anxious, they're a little paranoid, or for one reason or another, they just don't relate to it. So they hear about medical marijuana, and if they're like 80% of Republicans in Texas, they would support the option of medical marijuana. America is overwhelmingly pro-choice with respect to the option, there being the option with the doctor's guidance that a person should have the option of using this as a therapeutic modality. So I think on the cultural level, that argument is almost already decided. Again, politically, it's a little lagging behind. But I think that we will see a great expansion of this whole situation in the future as a result of medical users wanting not to benefit from cannabis therapeutically, but not to get high. And that's where CBD is so amazing, that what it brings to the table. So just to kind of roll back the few years, how all this came about, and how I was involved in launching Project CBD, and now I'm the director of Project CBD. It started for me it really ran parallel to the process of researching and writing Smoke Signals. And Smoke Signals is a social history of cannabis, a history told through characters of cannabis in America. And in the process of writing the book, I learned about CBD, about cannabidiol, because I began as a journalist to cover the science beat, the cannabis science beat. And this is something I knew nothing about when I embarked on the writing project initially. I was always sympathetic to marijuana. I've been a smoker since a teenager, of course, but I knew nothing about the science, the very interesting, rigorous, compelling science that's been going on now since the discovery of the initial discovery of a receptor in the brain that responded pharmacologically to THC. That was in 1988, that first discovery. And that was the first of a series of discoveries that were very significant over about 6 or 7 years, where in total it kind of fleshed in the basic workings of what's called the endocannabinoid system. And I knew nothing about this. And I would go to these conferences where scientists would come from all over the world, from every continent, several hundred, and they would present their latest findings. The rule was they could not present a paper they had already written. It had to be something new that would be in a paper in the future. So it was really cutting edge stuff. And you had leading scientists from various disciplines around the world as it related to this cannabinoid receptor system and so forth. And a lot of what I learned there, to the extent that I could even understand it initially, it was very obscure, the language, very obtuse, the scientific language. So it was a learning curve that was quite steep. Just an example of the kind of things that I would learn at these conferences, that the cannabinoid receptors, the receptors that in the brain that respond to THC, are the same receptors that regulate the process of neurogenesis, the process of creation of new brain cells in adult mammals. We're always creating new brain cells. And wow, you mean the cannabinoid receptors regulate that process of creating stem cells. And then they also regulate the process where these undifferentiated stem cells migrate and then differentiate and become different things in the body. That's just, I can rattle off 24 things like that. It was like, wow. Another thing I think will put everybody at ease. THC, according to the Scripps Research Institute in San Diego area, one of the very prestigious medical science institutes in the United States, they determined that THC suppresses an enzyme in the brain that's implicated in the formation of beta amyloid plaque, that's the hallmark of Alzheimer's. So that THC, the take-home message, THC will mitigate or inhibit the development of Alzheimer's. And there are many things we'll be hearing like this, and I was just astonished. And most of this, incidentally, is based on animal studies, preclinical research, test tubes, petri dishes, human cell lines that people kept alive after they died, but very little research on actual clinical research on human subjects because of prohibition. Well, that's beginning to change, certainly in other countries. But going to these conferences year after year, I started going in 2006. The star of the show that would emerge at these conferences was this compound I knew nothing about called cannabidiol. The scientists would report on the research with cannabidiol, and I was just astonished at what I'm hearing, on the basis of what they were saying. And in large part because, oddly enough, even though it was marijuana that led to the discovery of the endocannabinoid system, by the scientists trying to determine how marijuana worked in the brain, what happened on a molecular level, and so forth. And incidentally, ironically, much of this research was sponsored by the U.S. government because they decided they had to understand how marijuana works so they could explain why it was so harmful. And instead of explaining why it's harmful, they ended up explaining not only why it worked, but why it was therapeutic for many different conditions, for hundreds of conditions, literally. So that's a great irony of all this. But CBD was really, it was remarkable what we're hearing. We're hearing that CBD prevents damage from toxicity of alcohol poisoning. It prevents the onset of diabetes. Excellent for neuropathic pain associated with diabetes, multiple sclerosis, cancer, so forth and so on. Shrinks cancerous tumors. I mean, I do a slideshow on this. I don't know if we're going to actually present slides at the book show. I asked her to be able to do that, but if not, I'll just read some of the abstracts. And, it's very compelling. All these different conditions where this CBD seems to nail it. And mad cow, stopping it. Every phase of a prion infection, this infectious neurological illness, stops at every phase, according to a French study. You know, from so on and so forth. Just so many things. And I would sit there, and I'm one of two journalists who were at these conferences. Another fellow named Fred Gardner, who was the editor of a publication called O'Shaughnessy's. I brought a few with me. And I want to leave them here with you. It was actually launched by some of the initial cannabis clinicians in California after 215 passed in '96. They wanted to have a journal which they could report what they were finding. So they launched this journal called O'Shaughnessy's, named after William B. O'Shaughnessy, the first physician who actually brought the ganja back from India in the mid-1800s and to the West. So we named it after him. Anyway, so Fred Gardner, editor of O'Shaughnessy's, and I are here. We're listening to these lectures, and we're just shaking our head. I say to Fred, wouldn't it be amazing if we could get our hands on this CBD stuff? But there was none around in California. The problem was that, I don't want to call it a problem, just the way it played out historically is when homegrown marijuana became a phenomenon in the United States, back in the late 70s, early 80s, really initially in the Emerald Triangle, near where I live a little south of that. That's the cannabis breadbasket in Northern California. The amateur horticulturists who started to breed these strains and make new strains, and they came up with amazing things. We all benefited from it. We've all tasted the fruits of their labors. But without meaning to, they inadvertently bred the CBD out of it because they were looking for strains that got people as high as possible. That's what they figured people wanted. People smoke marijuana, you want to get high. So without meaning to, over time, they cross a strain, they try different ones. This doesn't do much. Put it aside, not realizing, And so we just assume you can't get it in Northern California. You can't get it anywhere in the United States. That's just the way it is. Tough luck. We'll have to wait for GW Pharmaceuticals, Sativex to be available in the United States, and maybe that's how people will get CBD, because there is an extract the mixture of both THC and CBD about equal that is available, as initially was for multiple sclerosis spasticity, approved in Canada, now approved in over 20 countries around the world. It's a British pharmaceutical company that makes this. It's a whole plant extract. It's a good product, actually. But you can't get it if you're in the United States, although it is now in phase 3 clinical trials for cancer in the U.S. And it'll probably be approved because it works. It really does work. Well, lo and behold, 2009, in this burgeoning medical marijuana industry, you remember in 2009, toward the end of the year, the Obama Justice Department issued the Ogden memo, it was called, that seemed to imply they were going to kind of let up and, let this thing air out and happen. It didn't play out that way really with the Obama administration, but at that moment there was really a great deal of entrepreneurial energy sparked by this memo. If people will go back and really read the memo carefully, it was unwarranted, that optimism, but nonetheless it did spark a lot of entrepreneurial energy. And in California, things were taking off, and we thought, well, legalization is inevitable. And different types of businesses are emerging, either within or alongside the medical marijuana industry. And one of those was these analytical labs that would emerge to test the strains, to see whether they had mold on them, to make sure they're safe, and to also do a profile of what's the cannabinoids in it, what are the lead components of the plant, how do they register? And basically what they were doing was telling you how much THC was in there. There's a little bit of, hundreds of other compounds, but THC is really the only one that gives you the big spike for 999 of 1,000 strains, excuse me. So when we heard about this analytical lab, Fred and I are both journalists. Fred is a former editor at Scientific American, and we kind of have a partnership. He writes his articles, I write mine, but we collaborate a lot. Not so much co-authoring, but we share a lot. And so I heard from Steve D'Angelo, the CEO of the Harborside dispensary, which I think is the biggest, certainly the biggest in California. I guess that means the biggest in the United States. That he had just backed a new project, an analytical lab called Steep Hill Labs in Oakland. A couple of guys who had been growers. They didn't have much of a scientific background, but they learned how to work these machines, and they started testing these strains. So we went to over a steep hill. Well, this was an interesting story in and of itself, that there would be labs now, at least one initially, to do this. That's it for the medical marijuana world. That's a significant story. You know, within a year there were like a dozen labs. But we went to the guys in Oakland. We said, you know about CBD, and they were kind of, you know. So we told them a little bit what we heard about CBD. I said, look, you probably never find this, but if you find if when you do your test you see a little spike for cannabidiol along with THC, would you please call us and let us know? Didn't hear anything for a while. And one day, in Steep Hill, I asked the same question. Anything register for CBD? Oh yeah, there's this one strain. They take out the thing, and we're looking at it. Yeah, there it was, about 5% CBD, 5% THC. And so who grew this strain? Oh, so and so. Well, we want to be in touch with them. Is that okay? Oh yeah, we call them. And the grower was delighted. He says, you know, that's interesting, because I didn't know if anybody would want to buy this stuff. It didn't make me very high, but it sure helped my back pain. You know? And well, within a few months, there were about half dozen strains that were identified, all with different growers along this way. And each time we'd contact the grower, and they got very interested and excited. And initially, one of these growers decided to make the strain available as clones. Say, hey, take it. They basically do what you want with it. And so Fred and I, watching everybody make millions, and that's an exaggeration, but some people were making a lot of business, and us, so the poverty-stricken writers, we said, well, what are we going to do with this? We actually had a number of strains came into our possession. Well, we decided we would give it away for free. And why? Because then we'd have a story to write about. Because if it was, it would get out there, and then there'd be a very interesting story, because we would find out if the experience with patients that patients would have with these strains would be anything like the scientists reporting for the experience of mice and rats. You know, the animal experiments don't always translate into human experiments, but they often do. So this is going to be really interesting. What's going to happen? We basically kind of just spread the seeds wherever we could get these clones. Initially it was the Harlequin strain. I don't know if you've heard that. And these, of the first 5 or 6 strains we found, well, 5 out of the 6 were either 1-to-1, relatively equal THC CBD, or maybe 3-to-2 CBD to THC, which was kind of interesting, particularly as edibles. They were very interesting. And there was one strain that was like a 10-to-1. It was really odd. And we lost that strain. It was sort of, they had it, and then it just disappeared. And that typically happens with clones and strain. You know, it's very chaotic and anarchic. But, and initially we thought, well, what we're going to do here, now that we're in the flush of this burgeoning industry, we're going to interest dispensaries in these strains, and they are going to make these available along with their other products, and they'll pay Project CBD, which we launched at the time as an educational service, you know, a little bit of money, like a monthly club fee, a club dues, and we put on a website the fact that these dispensaries actually had this stuff. And we thought, well, we would be able to support our effort that way. It didn't quite turn out that way, but we had enough to pay a person half-time starvation wages, you know, basically like that. A very dedicated young woman. She was great to work with, Sarah Rousseau. And she worked with us until this entire, we had about, I'd say maybe at the peak, maybe 16 dispensaries from several different states, Montana, Colorado, a few came on board, because once the word got out and there were other labs in other states, other labs would occasionally find that rare strain, and then and they would then check in with Project CBD. We wanted to hear about this, and we, you know, would interact with them. So, well, by it's 2011, I get about within 2 years after that Ogden memo, there was a big change of tune in terms of memos. Another memo was issued from the Justice Department explaining why they, you know, justifying a crackdown, basically, and every single one of those dispensaries affiliated with us were either raided or forced to shut down. Only 2 were left standing, and both of them were hassled to no end. Harborside, you know, is big tangle with the IRS now. The pharmacy in LA also, they got a lot of problems, legal problems. So pretty much our entire support network to do this kind of work was obliterated. So at that point, we had no money to pay Sarah, and it was taking a little while still. You know, the reaction among the medical marijuana industry to what we were imparting was, you know, it wasn't like, wow, great. It was like, you know, it was sort of, you know, because you can't get away from the fact that, at least in California, the medical marijuana industry has stoner roots. You know, it's a stoner subculture, and it largely is that. And I'm not putting that down. That's just what it is. You know, if you go to LA, there's hundreds of these dispensaries, and it's not that they don't look like. I mean, they look like, you know, in Amsterdam, a coffee shop practically. You know, and that's just the reality of the situation. And it took a little while for the community to kind of respond, or to kind of figure out what to do about this new thing. That the fact that there was pot that literally didn't get you high, or didn't get you very high, depending on the strain. And that was sort of like, you know. And so it also took a few growing seasons for growers to get interested in this. Growers aren't going to depend on this as a livelihood. They're not going to grow a strain that is not very psychoactive, that they're not sure they're going to be able to sell. So it was a kind of a new thing, and it took a few years to catch on. This year, big harvest for CBD is coming through in California. We know that. So it took about 3 harvest seasons, and getting past the loopity-loops of the Obama administration before we were able to stabilize. And when the shit hit the fan and they all collapsed, I decided, okay, it's time to finish writing this book, and I really, you know, because at least that was my income, you know, and so that was my focus. And once the book was finished, came out about a year and a few months ago in hardcover. It was my feeling, well, I'm going to go around, I'm going to talk about the book, I'm going to talk about CBD. Because CBD is only a little part of the book. I mean, it's there, and it's in a significant way, but it's not mainly about medical science, it's partly about medical science. So let's, you know, come to the present time. And you know, one of the problems that we are having among the doctors who are interested in CBD, you know, they could tell a patient, a doctor can tell a patient, can recommend cannabis, they can recommend CBD-rich cannabis or CBD-rich product, but they can't tell someone where to get it. That's against the law. Okay? And the problem was, I'll give you an example of the problem with these strains. There's a strain called Canatonic, and it turns out this is a strain that is kind of one of these 1-to-1 strains. Except it has a phenotype that's 20-to-1 CBD to THC. This is there's 2 broad types of strains, marijuana strains, that are CBD rich. There's ones that are kind of relatively balanced, 1-to-1, 3-to-2, 2-to-1, that has significant amount of THC, which actually is important for the medicinal interplay between CBD and THC. The synergy is very, very important. And then you have these other strains that are CBD dominant. They're kind of just the opposite of what we would get on the street, or we're going to get on most of what's available in dispensaries. 20-to-1 CBD, 15-to-1, or maybe it was that 10-to-1. The way they measure these things it's a little poetic, if you know what I mean. But you get the gist. It doesn't matter if it's 20 or 16-to-1. It's a dominant phenotype. And the problem is, people never knew quite what they were getting. The labs were not consistent in their accuracy, we found. The products, people would make tinctures, and then they put CBD on the label, and well, what's really in there? And sometimes they would try it, and it would work great. The next time they'd go back and try to get the same thing, hit or miss, you know, it didn't work. So it was very, you know, it's a very young industry, but the very significant development that made us very excited at Project CBD and really kind of enable what we're trying to do was the production of extracts. I'll pass it around for you. This is by a group called the Statewide Collective. They're not a dispensary. And what they make a very pure, good quality extract. They're all different. And you can take a look at these, and you'll see there's a number circled on the right-hand corner of the label. And then if you look in the left-hand corner, it will actually give the specific amount of how much CBD is in there and how much THC is in there. So one of those strains, it'll say 15 milligrams of THC, 15 milligrams of, actually not the strain, one of the extracts. Another one will have like that 20-to-1 ratio, and there's another one that's kind of in between there. And they made a series of them, so you can get any ratio you want from 1 to 5, up from the most dominant CBD, least THC to equal amount. And it's also a spray, an under the tongue spray, a little bit like the Sativex from GW. So each time you spray it, you know you're getting a certain amount, exactly what you're getting, and you know you can repeat it if it works for you. And a doctor can know that too. So it's really the patients who are educating the doctors at this point. Because the doctors can read their scientific abstracts about shrinking tumors or doing this or that, but what they're working with in those experiments are pure CBD, synthetic, and very large amounts. So you get 500 milligrams of pure pure CBD will shrink a tumor. 500 milligrams of whole plant THC would like obliterate, all the tumors on the block. It's much stronger, the whole plant CBD, particularly when it's combined even with a tiny bit of THC. It makes it much stronger. So the first challenge was, well, how do you figure out the dosage? You figure out by trying it, by getting the patient's feedback. So the two criteria that would be considered for recommending a remedy like this, a product like this, which obviously is not smokable, so that's another plus for someone who's not involved in this scene, who are struggling with a real serious illness, and they don't want to get into the whole smoking thing. Well, the first thing is, how much psychoactivity can this person tolerate? Do they want? Are they old stoners from last several decades? They'll go 1-to-1, that number 5. And you want as much THC as possible for many conditions, not necessarily all. You're a person who doesn't who had a bad experience with marijuana in the past, but you want to, you've heard about this and you want to try it, then you go the 20-to-1 CBD to THC, which is totally non-psychoactive. The 1-to-1, maybe a little psychoactive, depending how much you take, and could be, and also depending on a person's sensitivity. So the first criteria is, well, what can a person handle? And the second thing is, well, what's the condition? What are they dealing with? And the kind of things that we're finding out, if it's anxiety, if that's the main condition, very small doses of a CBD-dominant remedy tend to work. If it's neuropathic pain, chronic pain, or cancers, higher doses, as much THC as possible along with it, seems to work the best for people. But again, it varies. And so we're accumulating a lot of interesting data now. And this is a great experiment, and the responses are really phenomenal. I'm not a proselytizer, and I'm willing to hear the negatives. I want to hear if it doesn't work. But what we hear is working. I mean, you know, of course, about the children with intractable epilepsy who respond very, very well to these CBD-dominant products. Many different kinds of cancers, advanced cancers, are going into remission. And this is not just simply on the basis of what the patient is saying. The MRIs are taken, you see the tumor, they're on a program for 3 months, and the tumor is shrinking, gone. When you have that kind of evidence, it's very, very powerful. And I wince a little bit when I hear people saying, well, cannabis cures cancer, because didn't cure it for Bob Marley. Come back to him, he had brain cancer, right? So I don't think we want to go overboard this, but I feel very comfortable saying that it is consensus now within the medical science community that know about this stuff, that the cannabinoids CBD and THC have anti-tumoral properties, anti-metastatic properties, anti-proliferative properties. This is shown in animal studies, that preclinical research shows this, and then the experiences that patients are reporting are validated by that scientific information. So we could say this at this point. I think cancers, I think you want to wait 5 or 6 years before you say it's really cured. That doesn't come back. It's obviously great if a tumor shrinks and it goes into remission, but what about the next year? Does it come back? I think we don't have to overstate the case. It's very, very exciting, the potential of this kind of medicine, and its applications are the versatility of it is just astonishing. If you look at the Project CBD website, we've just been relaunching it now. You look at the homepage. There's 50 conditions listed on the homepage. You click on one, and you'll see just science abstracts, titles of science abstracts from PubMed. That's the U.S. National Library of Medicine's online repository of medical information. I mean, most of it's from PubMed. Meaning you can just pick your condition. Just look what they're saying about CBD and PTSD, CBD and whatever it might be. But again, they're single molecule. That's their approach. At Project CBD, we are not single molecule approach. We reject the idea that it's all about CBD or all about THC. It's all about the whole plant. And we're for defending the whole plant, promoting whole plant cannabis therapeutics. And CBD is going to be a hot potato for the drug warriors. This is a tough one for them to handle because it's non-psychoactive, there's no known side effects, and look at the kids, what it did. And then look at the other things, I mean, how are they there's no response to this from the drug war position, in and of itself. And we sensed that we knew this was going to be a dilemma for the other side, if you will. We thought, well, how are they going to respond to this? Well, we're going to say CBD is the good cannabinoid and THC is the bad cannabinoid, and that's exactly what they're saying. We anticipated. Oh, no. Oh, CBD is okay, but THC, it's the thing that makes you crazy and it's toxic and lowers kids' IQs and everything like that. Nonsense. All that stuff. There's no science for it. But already that's the game they're trying to play. And sometimes we talk strategy sessions. Well, maybe we should just push. Let's hand out CBD-rich cannabis on the steps of City Hall and someplace, and purposely get arrested and publicize this and demand that they legalize CBD-rich marijuana. No, not just CBD-rich. It has to be any marijuana. You can't just. That's foolish to do that. So it's interesting, and I think this could be an interesting political factor, CBD. But the most important thing is that it really helps people. And we get, not a day goes by where we don't get inquiries from all around the world. People saying, how can they get this? That's what they want. How can they get this? And we say, well, you got the money to fly from New Zealand to California? You can. It's very easy. You don't know how you can get it from New Jersey if you're in New Jersey and you want it from California. If you know somebody in California, cousin, relative, friend, or if you can get to California, if it's you going there, all you have to do is go to the DMV, tell them what hotel you're in, get a temporary residence, go to a doctor, get a letter of recommendation, and that's very easy, unlike in New Jersey. It's like ridiculous.
Candy.
And as it should be, actually, I feel. I think that's more appropriate. And then you can order these or other products. You can go into a dispensary. Most of them don't have CBD product, but increasingly now they're having different kinds of things, topicals and tinctures, extracts, a lot of interesting edibles, a lot of lozenges, things like that, and of course the flower. Or if you want these particular kind of extracts, you can order them, and within 24 and 48 hours it'll be shipped to you because it's not a storefront, it's not a dispensary. This whole business emerged when things were collapsing, and they realized, well, we need some way of doing this outside of dispensaries. They're just too vulnerable. And we were very pleased that that the statewide emerged, and so we work with them closely now. And you can get their extracts in a couple of dispensaries. I think one in LA, one in San Francisco. They might do more of a push in that direction, but that's never been their orientation. It's been serious patients who want it and need it. And if they can figure out, with the help of a doctor or not, what they want to order, what ratio for their condition, great. So we'll be publishing a dosage guide on the website. That'll be happening soon to help people explore this because it is tricky. The last point I want to make, I'll give you an example of how tricky it can be. It really was an eye-opener to hear about the children with Dravet's and other syndromes of the intractable epilepsy. How amazing a remedy, and really miraculous, the CBD-rich strains were. When Fred and I were sitting there at these conferences, we couldn't have predicted that. We knew anti-epileptic, anti-convulsant, because that was being reported. But of all the things we were hearing, that's just that's the amazing thing that first emerged so dramatically. I'm not sure if it's any more dramatic than shrinking tumors, really, but it's very dramatic. And on the Project CBD website, you can click on the homepage again, you'll see where you can, 10-minute video of some of these children. It was a little bit on the Sanjay Gupta show, they featured that, but it's a more, of that same girl, it's featured in a much more in-depth way, video, and it's really worth looking at. And I have not had any response from anybody when they see that, where they just, that's it, no debate. They're just floored by what they see, because when you see that little kid, shaking with her seizures, and then later she's doing tap dancing and screaming and going, it's like, wow. I mean, but we've heard of cases where an epileptic child is, parent, of course, has recommended cannabis with high CBD, and they start to use it, and it works very well for them for about a month and a half, and then it stops working. They go back to the doctor. What do we do? Are we using the wrong thing? Are we using the wrong strain? What's going on? One particular doctor, Dr. Frank Lucido, I respect him quite a bit. He was the doctor of Angel Rach, the woman who took her case to the Supreme Court. He said, try a THC dominant strain. Worked. On it now. So it's not as simple as just, and we don't, we don't know quite what's going on with these kids. I mean, the last science conference I went to, Jehan was there as well. Jehan Marcoux, I don't know if he's part of your group, but he's a close friend and a collaborator. It was in Vancouver. There was a report by an Israeli scientist describing how micro doses of THC was having would confer a long-lasting neuroprotective effect, and a long-lasting cardioprotective effect, and long-lasting protective effect on liver injury. Micro doses. So I kind of buttonholed him after the talk. I said, "Have you done any work with CBD?" Big smile. I said, "What have you found?" He said, "Same thing. Micro doses of CBD has this long-lasting protective effect." So for all we know, maybe it's the little bit of THC in Charlotte's Web that's doing the trick. We don't know. I'm pretty confident that CBD has a lot to do with it. But we know the THC and CBD are together are very, very, very important, and there will be an effort on the part of pharmaceutical companies to divide these. It's already you have Marinol, you have Naminol, pure THC. There will be pure CBD. There already is. It's as a research tool for scientists. That will be probably available on the market. It just won't be very good. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but like the Dixie Elixir products, they're a little bit like that. They're a little bit of CBD and pretty much nothing else, and they're not very good products. And I wince when people, write us, say I'm taking Dixie Elixirs, whatever, for my prostate cancer. What do I? I'm not going to tell someone not to take something, but it's really not as effective as it might work for anxiety, what they have, because it's it's a weak medicine. But you're going to see companies like Medical Marijuana Inc. and these others try to exploit people's growing interest in CBD with products that may not be very helpful. And what we fear is that people go, "Oh, well, come on, yeah, I heard about that stuff and I tried it." That would be a pity, because this stuff really helps. So it's part of what we try to do at Project CBD is kind of put ourselves in the mix and review things, comment on things, be a part of the media discussion. And we knew from the get-go that CBD could be really big, and one of these days on television there's going to be a national news story that's the pot that doesn't get you high, and finally it was in August of this year, Sanjay Gupta. So didn't surprise us. We actually knew the show was coming, but that eventually would get, because it's a man bite dog story. Pot that doesn't get you high. What fun is that? You can. Actually, it's a lot of fun if you need it, but fun is not the right word. So that's part of what's happening. It's a very dynamic, very fluid situation. There's growing interest in CBD. Not just in California, Washington. We have an affiliate now in Washington State that is Project CBD/Seattle. They're supplying clones to everybody who wants them there, and A lot of interesting things are about to unfold with this, but the main thing, it can help people. And if nothing else, that's what it's all about.
Can I ask you a question? So,
Bonnie?
Yeah.
so you're in New Jersey,
Mhm.
in Princeton, New Jersey.
I've just
and-
broken the law, by the way. I'm so sorry.
No, that's quite all right. But you're also in the largest industry in New Jersey is pharmaceutical,
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
and actually followed by tourism and then agriculture. Interestingly enough. Do you know of any pharmaceutical companies in the United States who are pursuing using THCs, cannabinoids, or
Cannabinoids. Every major pharmaceutical company is researching this area.
How? Since they can't get the CBD legally, can they? Can't
They can get CBD as a synthetic, single molecule compound. It is supplied, they maybe can get it from the US government, but there's a company in England called STI Pharmaceuticals that supplies material for researchers. It's strictly, they can't sell that to somebody, you or me. Only for scientific research with DEA approval, et cetera, et cetera.
But they can't get the THC.
THC is available as,
Well, synthetic, but not natural from a plant.
The Schedule I prescribing license, they can get any of the marijuana products.
Yeah.
They have to get it from NIDA, who
Right.
generally
the
want.
flower, they get the
Right,
flower,
it's
the
gotta
actual
be
plant.
With the Schedule I.
But if it's a
license.
synthetic product, then they don't get it from NIDA. But they need permission of a whole raft of agencies. And the pure THC is available as a medicine, but I think it's like Schedule 5?
Schedule 3.
Right.
Schedule 3. I
Schedule
mean,
3.
it's considered a drug that has very little abuse potential. And anyone who's taken Marinol will understand why. It's horrible.
So my follow-up question is, so what happened to the drug, so Marinol during the devastation of AIDS, especially in San Francisco, was frequently prescribed to AIDS patients because it decreased nausea and increased appetite, which was the primary reason it was prescribed. What happened to the drug Marinol, and is the same pharmaceutical company following up with any of this?
Well, anyone who had the choice between Marinol and cannabis would choose cannabis because cannabis works better. And Marinol, I took Marinol once when I was very ill. And I thought maybe I should try. I had prescription. It was just terrible. And I'd be happy to say otherwise. I'm just saying what I experienced. It was just that I would not imagine wanting to have that experience just to have it. It's not pleasant. Has anybody here had an edible from a THC dominant strain? Maybe a little too much? Maybe a little too much? You know what that? Well, Marinol is like that in umpteen times. Where, THC alone is not very pleasant, and the reason why it is pleasant, even in a strong strain, is because you have not because of CBD, which is there in very small amounts. It's because of the terpenes, the components of the plant that give it its smell. That buffers the THC. All the strains in the dispensaries have, again, except for the CBD products, they're all high THC. What's the difference between them? Someone wants a strain because this helps me sleep. This one gives me energy. This one gives good for pain. But what is the difference between these strains? They're all high THC. The difference isn't, well, one's 14%, the other's 16%. That's meaningless. Take a slightly bigger, breath into, and it's not the THC that makes the strains different. It's the things that give the plant its smell, the terpenes. THC and CBD.
What's that word again? I'm sorry.
Terpene, terpenoids, cannabinoids,
terpenoids.
turpentine.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Terpenes, that's what makes each strain unique, the combination of terpenes. And now there are labs that can measure terpenes and give you a terpene profile. So here's, to underscore the confusion we're dealing with in California, I mentioned Canatonic, and I've been talking quick and going in a different direction. Canatonic, there's a strain 1-to-1 CBD THC, but there happens to be another one that's 20-to-1. It's both called Canatonic. So that's confusing right there. Then we have this strain, there was a few of these CBD dominant strains that emerged. One was called Oracle, another was called ACDC, a couple other names for it. And I looked at these plants and I said, I don't see any difference in these plants. We should have the Oracle and the ACDC tested. We had a terpene analysis of both. Terpene is like a fingerprint, a terpene analysis for the plant. Exact same terpene profile. We knew it was the same plant. So you have the same plant with different names. You have different name. Then you have the same name for different. You know, you see how chaotic it is. And then when a doctor tells a patient to try to find the CBD rich, you know how confusing it's going to be for a patient when they're actually trying to get it. So that's why these extracts and things like this, I think it brings it to another level of what's possible for people. And I don't advocate this instead of other things. It's in addition to, have it be an option, this kind of thing. And I think this sort of thing is going to be the way with the future. Please, Ken.
Martin, maybe you've answered this, I don't know, but I ran into some people at the Boston Hemp Festival about from U.S. hemp oil, and
Yes.
they said that their CBD-rich strain, they got an opinion from federal people that it was okay to send this through the mail,
Yeah.
that it was not a violation of federal law. What's your opinion?
Well, this is, did everyone hear Ken's comment? It was about, there's something we call hemp oil that CBD dominant, and this is all medical marijuana Inc. They may have found a little bit of a loophole in the law. It's not clear. Their premise is that if you bring a hemp product into the country, industrial hemp is grown in many countries, not here, and you can bring in industrial hemp or hemp products as long as they're less than 0.3% THC, which is minimal. I mean, industrial hemp doesn't have a lot of THC to begin with, right? So if they're bringing in a product, whether it's the oil from the seed or something to make the fabric or the paper, whatever they're going to make with these products, you know, there's thousands of products made from industrial hemp, at least could be. As long as it's under 0.3%, that's considered legal by a federal government and the DEA. So it is possible to, CBD is the dominant cannabinoid in industrial hemp. There's more CBD than any other cannabinoid. Unlike cannabis, it tends to be more THC. But the cannabinoid profile in cannabis is much more robust than industrial hemp. So there's more CBD in there, but overall there's not a lot of cannabinoids in industrial hemp. So if you want a good source of CBD, it's going to be a cannabis plant with CBD, not industrial hemp. But it is possible. If you grow it in China and you get it cheap, you know, to extract the oil, and you'll get CBD. It's probably, you know, it's economically viable. Maybe if you're the first to market, as they've been. So this is what they claim is going on. And I've asked them. I said, all right, well, can I please see your import license for this? I never see it. No, maybe that's not something they want to, you know, a journalist is entitled to. But I've tried to press a little because this is a burning question. Is it legal or not? And I think it's a gray area. And I don't know if it is, and I don't know if it isn't. But I'm a little bit suspicious of all this stuff. But the main thing is that the product is not very good if it's CBD you want. Because they have to, if they're going to send a product, well, if it's going to be in Whole Foods in Pennsylvania, where medical marijuana is not legal, it has to be under 3% THC. And that makes for a very weak product. Because also the way they make it, they lose all the terpenes. They're not very skillful, that company, in terms of what they're doing. The Dixie folks, they're sort of, I don't know. But we analyze their products. We give it to a lab, tell us what's in there. And what they say on the label is not what's in there. They say there's a certain amount of CBD there. It's not there. It's about half of what they say. And we tested it a number of times. But it's there, but it's about half of what they say, and there's virtually no THC, so it's legal, presumably. And they lose all the terpenes in the process of extracting the oil because they don't know how to do it right. So, and I asked them, well, how do you take the oil out? I mean, there's a number of ways of doing it. Oh, it's proprietary. Okay, well, great, you've got all those. Maybe if you told me, I could tell you a better way. You know, so I think it's a bit of a scam in a way, and I'm troubled because they market it as, so this is like Rick Simpson oil, you know, and that's a THC dominant oil which will, you know, put you on the carpet, but it will also shrink your tumors. So, you know, if you can handle it, you can handle it. That's great if you can handle it. If you really need something that concentrated and that strong, it's almost, you have to have a CBD in there so you can maybe remain functional, because without it, you're not going to be at the dosage.
With taking something, a product like that might be legal because it has so little THC in it, if you smoked or consumed marijuana, cannabis with THC in it, would it then interact at all, whether or not synergistically, would it react with the straight CBD? In
I
other
think it
words,
would.
could you take a 1-in-1 and then some of the legal, which without the terpenes would not, would that work?
I think
Like,
it would.
okay, when you had your marijuana experience, not that it matters, but would it be like 10 milligrams or 2.5?
I believe this was a 60 milligram.
Yeah, well,
Since
they
I
come
like
up,
the
yeah, they come up
marijuana,
to like 20 or 10, I think. But
I think maybe it was
No.
30. I can't remember. There were two amounts. I keep it in my refrigerator.
But did
still.
you had a
I'd
would
pick
be
the higher
less than an
amount.
optimal experience? Did you or know anybody that had the same experience that would then try Marinol with also smoking? That would that work? Because that was what Cheryl found
She-
worked well.
uh,
That it would a little bit at the time a vaporizer inhale, but with a pretty decent amount of Marinol, and it seemed to take away that ill effect and worked very well on pain. Then.
Yeah, I
With
could
just a
see
little
that.
bit of
I
smoke.
could see that. You know, the other thing, people who are seriously ill, like your wife was, they may not get the same kind of psychoactive effect from Marinol at someone who is not seriously ill, because whatever is going on there, it may be an issue with the way the receptors are functioning, the way the endogenous cannabinoid system is functioning, that there might be a dysfunction in that system which underlies the illness.
Yeah.
So I think of someone like Irv Rosenfeld. You may know of Irv as the one of the federal patients. I don't know if he's been through New Jersey. I think he's the longest. He's had it the longest. He says he never gets high from smoking marijuana. It's not because he smokes the lousy stuff the government gives him. He doesn't just smoke that, you know. But so that whatever is causing all those tumors on his bones is also causing him not to experience a high from marijuana. So he could probably take Marinol with reckless abandon and be perfectly fine. So yeah, I think
Because, you know, it's just like a combination of somebody, like Cheryl in a state program where Marinol didn't cost it, in other words, $9 for a 5 milligram pill, which is prohibitive. You know, it would be actually a $2,100 bottle of pills per month, which is unbelievable. But combined with the small, and I've done my own experiments with it because I would never give her any pills I didn't try myself, so I would understand maybe what's going on with her. And I would take about twice as much because I was almost twice her body weight. And I found the same thing, that with Marinol and a little bit of smokable was an incredibly different experience. And after taking Marinol 3 hours later, to have a little bit of smoke, it would be greatly enhanced. Still, I don't know if it's synergistic or just positive and enforcement on each one, but
Yeah.
you know, it seemed to be. So for some people that could get CBD legally because of a less than 0.3 THC content, you know, would help if they were in the state program in New Jersey. I mean, beyond needing a specific amount for a child or something you're watching very closely, there's going to be quite a few people that could maybe benefit from having something that wouldn't work by itself and then getting something that's too expensive to get enough of and maybe get relief combined.
I think it's a really interesting point. I think it's a really good point.
And in New Jersey, it's a lot of matter of it's going to be so expensive getting it legally for a lot of patients. They're going to be better off having a legal supply enough to go ahead and get something that's cheaper and go a little more hit or miss when they don't need an exact, you know, when it works just as well. So it just seems, as what I'm hearing you say, it might be very interesting for people who need a higher CBD content to actually mix the two. Like you said, it'd be a shame if they took one and said, it doesn't work, and lost that for not the right reason, because it didn't work, because it might have been taken in better content.
You know, we never, we do get a lot of queries about these products, and people asking us, and we always say, well, if it's the only thing you can get, go for it. You know, there are, we feel there are better products out there, but this is something actually I should suggest. Exactly what you said. It makes perfect sense. It doesn't matter if you take it a pill and then you smoke it. It's in there. You know. So combining these, I can see how, if you've got a heavy dose of pure THC, any terpenes that would come in from a joint would help buffer the experience.
Right.
So that's really an interesting idea.
That's what we used to do.
Do you know what foods